back over here on the wiring harness connection point, you see on the left side we have 4 terminals, and on the right side we have 8. We've removed quite a few terminals from here, and the things that we removed are the things that we're not going to be needing. So the next one that we're going to want to remove is this one right here. And what this is, that is the proportioning valve signal. So remember, when we were looking at the harness itself, and I showed you that proportioning valve switch, so when the master cylinder goes low on brake fluid, it would send a signal back up through the dash, and a red light would come on that said brake, and that was to let you know that you were running low on brake fluid. So we're going to remove this because we do not need that, because the master cylinder and proportioning valve that I'm running, it's going to be a Wildwood setup, so it doesn't require this. It just needs the brake light switch, and the proportioning valve is wired to be tagged into the signal for your brake lights. So next we're removing this, and when you trace this wire back, it's the tan wire right here, and I've already taken the liberty of pulling the terminal out, the connection out, the way I've showed you. And when you follow that back, it comes all the way back here to the printed fuse connector. And where that's at on this part is right here, and it's sharing a spot with another tan wire in spot number 2 of the printed circuit connection harness. So we're going to remove that. Next, we're going to remove the tan wire from our wiring harness connection, and that wire is the tan wire, and it's right there at the top right hand corner of the wiring harness connection. Now we have successfully removed all the wires that we will not be needing out of the wiring harness connection point. So on this left side you have 3 terminals. Your harness connection will only have the 3 terminals. You'll have purple, pink, and green. The purple one, that's going to go to the starter solenoid. The pink one will go to your HEI, and the green one goes to your water temperature sending unit that's in the head of your engine. Some pickup trucks had a white wrapped coating wire that was for the coil in place of this pink one. So you would use that to go into your HEI. It's just the same as the pink one. It's just wrapped in a different type of coating. When you open up the box, on the back side of the panel, you see purple, pink, and right there is the green. Starter solenoid, HEI, and the green one would be for your water temperature sending unit. Okay, we've just established what these 3 ports on this side of the wiring harness connector is for. We know that this terminal here, behind it, there's a green wire, and that green wire is for the water temperature sending unit. You flip it over, there's the green wire, you trace it back, and it's going to lead you here to our old friend, the printed circuit connector. This green wire is in port number 6. So this is where everything gets to be a little more easier, because you cut this off, strip it back, and then you'd put your connection end on it. You get your aftermarket gauge. I prefer autometer, but you attach this green wire to the gauge in your dash on the sending unit terminal of the gauge. Then on your harness connection, which we have right here on the harness connection, we know that this green wire is for the sending unit. So then you would run this wire that's on the back side of this terminal to the sending unit. And then when you plug this in, you will have gauge function. So everything's starting to come together, and I hope I'm showing you how things can be done. And it's pretty simple now that you're getting along with this video. So I've cut this green wire as close as I can to the printed circuit harness. I've taken my blue tape, and you can see I've written on there water temp. So then when I lay this out, I won't get confused with any of the other green wires that's inside this wiring harness. Now it's time to move to the right side of our wire harness connection points. With this side completed, we no longer have anything to do with this. Everything's done here. We're moving over to here. And the first wire that we're going to want to remove out of this is going to be this brown and white wire that you see I got pulled out already. And that brown and white wire, I've taken it loose so I can yank it through here. I thought I did. There we go. See, it's coming out, and now that wire has been removed from that terminal. It's the end. We go back to the wire harness connection, which mounted on this side of the truck like this, and if you look, you see that there's a missing spot. If you remember, there was a big thick brown wire right there that ran out to our voltage regulator. Now that that's removed, and we have it removed from here, let's talk about what the little baby brown and white striped wire was doing connected to that. So when you trace this brown and white wire back, it's going to lead you to this. This is the ignition switch harness. Now you can see there's been a problem here. It's burned up. And when I got this truck a couple years back, and I pulled this all apart and I seen this, but then I looked at the ignition itself, and it had been replaced with a brand new one. It was like new. As to where this thing was all dusty and whatnot, that was brand new. So the ignition switch went bad, and I'm guessing maybe something wasn't grounded, or the switch just went bad and was just heating up, and it just failed, and they smelled the electrical smell and the burning plastic, and they figured out what was wrong. So back to what I was saying, that brown and white striped wire is right there, tied in with the ignition switch harness. As I said, this is a keyed on ignition feed, this brown and white wire. So the brown and white wire that's attached to the ignition switch, when you turn the key on, even when in the accessory mode, it was sending current through the wire up here through that, and then the other side was the wiring harness connection with the big thick brown wire. Well, that big thick brown wire was feeding a signal to the voltage regulator, and then the voltage regulator wire that came out was plugged into the alternator, energizing the internals of this alternator. It was talking to it, telling it, hey, we're about ready to fire up. So that's why we removed this, because as I said, we no longer need the voltage regulator, and we no longer need this. You can buy new ignition switch. Don't buy, just, it's easier just to go to LMC or Classic Parts of America and order this, and you'd have to order it for your year. This came out of a 72, so you'd order it for a 72. 67s had a smaller ignition switch, so you want to make sure that you order in the right year for your vehicle. And you can push these pins out just like I've been showing you, that little trick I showed you a little bit back. And you get these pins out and then you can shove them back up in here. My advice is, if you got a situation like this, I'd wait till I got the new harness connection and then do each wire one at a time so that you can get them right and there would be no confusion. You also can buy the terminals, and as far as that goes, you can buy the terminals that are inside of the wire and harness connection too, because they're weird looking, but they do sell them to where you can replace these if you like. So if you wanted a neater installation, you know, you could wire new things in through your harness and have it come through here and have power fed and everything's okay. But that'd just be my advice on that whole situation. And once again, this brown power wire, brown and white striped wire, was a keyed on ignition power wire, and it sent the signal through the fuse box up through here, and it went to the brown wire that was on the voltage regulator. One quick note that I'd like to add: if your ignition harness isn't burnt up like mine and you're not going to be replacing it, and you don't want to pull the pin out, which I suggest you pull the pin out, get a new connector, and then just run this wire in the connector, crimp it down and shove it up in here, because they sell the factory connections, like I said, from Classic Parts of America or LMC Truck. But if you don't want to go through that, and I'm not telling you to do this, but you could always just cut the brown and white wire here, since everything on the other side has been removed, but then make sure there's no wire showing. Use some of the shrink wrap to seal it off, and then tape it down with some black electric tape to the brown ignition wire. Like I said, that's just a suggestion, and I'm not saying that that's what you should do, but that would be something that you could do. Me, since I got to get a new harness connector, and even if I didn't have to, I would just push this pin out, get the new pin, cut the wire, the big brown wire here, strip it back, get it crimped in the new connection, solder it, shrink wrap it, and then shove it back up in the terminal. Now that we are onto the ignition switch, I want to say that that is the only wire, the brown and white striped wire is the only wire that we will be removing from the ignition harness. The rest of these wires all have to stay, because they all provide functions that we need. As you've been following along, I've been detailing what each one of them are and where they go and what they do. Again, this thin brown with the white stripe wire on the ignition switch is the only wire from the ignition switch that needs to be removed. The next wire that we have to do something with that is on the ignition switch, however, is this tan wire. And this tan wire runs all the way back, and it meets up with the printed circuit. And this printed circuit is what we're going to be getting into next, because now I'm going to tell you what the remaining wires in the printed circuit are and what they do.